Hello and welcome to the Yoga podcast. The Tower Yogurt podcast. What? What's
You,
that?
you guys are branching out.
Exactly. It's been a minute, so that's probably why I just tripped over my words. But we're back recording another episode, this time in honor of our teacher of the month, which is Sonny Mannon. And he's come on board recently to teach Qi Gong and Tai Chi over at the Lotus Room, which I've been happy I've got to go to a lot of the Qigong classes so far, and it's amazing. Couple things about how I met you. I actually don't know, but I know that during the shutdown, I did Zoom Tai Chi classes with you, and that was really, really cool.
Yeah, I remember that.
Somehow we connected and stayed connected through that, and then you reached out about teaching at Tower Yoga, which was really cool because Jameson, like mere weeks before you had reached out, was like, I really think Qigong or something like that would be like good in this space. This space is asking for it. And I thought, well, should we try to like find someone? And he said, no, the perfect person is going to come forward. And then like 3 weeks later, you sent an email. So
Yeah, that's
the universe works like that.
that was perfect. Yeah, it was great. I was pretty surprised it was going like that, but it seemed to just really flow, didn't it?
Yeah. And you know, what's really cool, and I'll just like tell like the listeners and tell you, Sunny, that like within the Zoom classes, I felt like I could like feel you and like the potency of your teaching through the screen, which was really cool. And that was kind of hard during that time to
Mm.
feel connected. But I think there is this thing that I was wondering if that was going to come through like in person. Sometimes you like meet people in person and it's like weird or whatever. It
Yeah, totally.
totally just felt exactly like how it did on Zoom, which was cool. That's hard to do, by the way, just like giving you a little compliment there. But
Thank you.
I really appreciate your teaching because I feel the depth of your knowledge and like the respect you have for the practice. And at the same time, too, it's so like salt of the earth and down, like down to earth. And it's a good mixture of feeling like it's like serious and also playful. It's a very, very good mixture. I just wanted to give you a little compliment on that. And we're really lucky to have you at the studio offering this. Yeah, so I guess I will let you take it away, but please share anything that you want to about yourself with the community and the listeners, and also, what is Qigong, what is Tai Chi? I know that's kind of a big question, but in a nutshell, if you can.
Yeah, right. I'll try to stay as succinct as possible for that one. But I appreciate everything you said. I mean, I'm having a great time being up there in Terra Yoga, and I'm sharing these practices with the community. It's something that I've been doing now for almost, actually over 20 years now. I started early in my 20s. It doesn't seem like I've been doing it that long because in reality, I've just been doing the same thing. It's like I say in class, this whatever you're doing on day one is the same stuff you're doing on day 100, day 1000, day whatever. And so, in that regard, I mean, I'm just a product of my teachers. You know what I mean? I've been really lucky, and luck is obviously a big part of it. Some of it just has to do with who do you bump into first. You know what I mean? Like, what school do you walk into? Who's running the Tai Chi or the Kung Fu school down the block, kind of thing. And I got really lucky with the teacher that was doing that. And so he set the bar very high, which meant that I could feel what he was doing. He was very grounded. He could show what he was doing. So I trusted him. I learned right away. Trust your teacher. And this is something too that a friend of mine said. That takes that into another space a little bit, which I realize is such a good way to put it. Is there is no dignity in front of your teacher, meaning it is okay to do it wrong. It is okay to not know how to do it. Like no one expects you to, teacher expects you to know how to do it right before they've showed you any aspect of it. You know what I mean? And so it's this idea, one of my really major teachers, Andy Dale, who is probably the main influence on how I practice Qigong and how I practice Tai Chi, and how I work within the different aspects of the art. Would say invest in loss, which that's any good concept is going to have a lot of space for interpretation. But a way we would interact with this in our practice is like, yes, you want to feel what you're doing right, but you're also probably doing some things that could be improved upon, or however you want to classify it. You know, you want to classify it as doing it wrong, whatever, it doesn't matter. We can say just invest in loss. Look where, you know, you can get better. Look where you can feel more of your practice, where you can stay more grounded, where you can relax more, where you can strive for more refinement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Like, so in that way, it allows you to both stay grounded and look for areas of improvement, but then also allow your goals within the practice to stay lofty. You know what I mean? Like, because you're allowing yourself to say, well, I don't quite measure up to what I am trying to do, and that's okay, right? I want this to be a process that pulls me forward continuously, not only to a certain point and it goes, boom, you got it, move on. And so this was sort of the process that they shared with me through my teachers. And it was something that I needed. I mean, I needed it within my own physical practice because I came into these arts with a lot of physical experience. I had been an athlete since I was very young. My dad was a collegiate athlete and a collegiate coach, very high level, just a high level performer athletically. You know what I mean? So he just knew how to use his body. Pretty much any sport, he could figure it out, you know? And so from a Western sport perspective, he was on a very high level. And so I was kind of grew up in the gym, in the track, you know, seeing people who knew how to move and use their bodies, you know? And so I trained like a madman or like a mad child, you know, like since, I mean, like just hours and hours doing stuff. We were playing basketball, running, throwing things against walls and kicking things and just whatever I could do, you know, whatever I could learn to get better, I would do it because that was sort of the culture I was immersed in, you know? And so, it was a lot of fun. But, you know, like as I got older, performance starts to wane. Performance starts to get more wrapped around different things, you know? Like when you're a kid and you're doing it, I can still remember when I was a kid, like playing along to like MJ and like Dominique Wilkins and all this stuff, like with a Nerf hoop, you know, and like behind the couch, you know, like when I was 10. You know, like you don't care about winning at that point. You're just having fun, like seeing what they're doing and yeah, you know what I'm saying? And so if you're just listening to this, that was a really sweet dunk fake that I just did.
I witnessed it. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. Totally for realsies. I jumped and everything, right? Yeah. But anyways, so, you know, you're just having fun. And so as you get out of, you know, as I got further in, I went to, you know, I played at junior college. I earlier on when I was playing, I thought I was going to go to a really high level. I was performing very high, but just for a lot of different reasons, performance kind of hit a peak around my junior, senior year. I had injuries starting to add up. I wasn't in a high profile area, whatever. You know what I mean? I loved being at COS. It was great. The team I was on was COS's College Sequoias, which is here in Visalia, not too far from Fresno. It's been a fixture here in the community for a long time, just like places like Fresno City and Fresno State and stuff, you know. And so anyways, I played there and it's great. We were like one of the best teams in the state. I ended up getting a scholarship, thankfully, to be able to go and, you know, get my education at a private school. And so went there and played for a couple of years. And then literally like right within a few months of graduating, I was like, I'm done playing basketball. I'm going to go do Kung Fu now. And I looked up in the phone book and I found a school and I went to the school and it was called California Martial Arts Academy and it was in Irvine and it was literally a half mile from where I was living in Irvine, which is where I went to school. And I walked in and I met Sifu John Chang, who, you know, made me feel like I was like 5 years old again, trying to like learn how to hit a baseball for the first time or throw something for the first time, like completely awkward, completely just like new in my body again, but not knowing what to do. But I didn't mind that. I knew that was the training space. You know what I'm saying? Like from training as a kid, I was like, wow, this is like really, I suck. You know what I mean? But I knew you had to suck to get better, right? And so he, you know, I started training with him and he's got his own huge, long story that is amazing and also a little bit tragic as well. You know, he's no longer with us, which is a whole thing. I don't want to really get into it right now, but he was just an amazing guy who embodied and lived his art, you know? And so when I was training with him, I trusted him. I listened to him. as I was doing the more external martial arts, which was already opening me up, getting into my waist, getting into my hips, getting me moving and feeling my body differently. He said, you should come to Tai Chi class. You should come and try the Tai Chi. And so I was like, all right. And so I went to Tai Chi on Saturday mornings, and it was so hard, but so fun. And it felt so good because you're just going so slow. And it was like discovering something. It was like all of a sudden, you're moving in the space and you're like, what? There's something here when I slow down and move like this? Crazy. What's there, And it was like that. I would go tell my friends what I was doing, and they were just like, what's this kid's weird. I mean, I was always a little weird, obviously.
Mhm.
So it was like too on brand for them to really have an impact, to be honest. They were just like, Sonny again, off on some weird stuff, or it was more in the beginning, they knew how much I loved training. And so the fact that I was just throwing myself into training wasn't a big surprise, And so,
Mhm.
anyway, my teacher kept saying, hey, you know what? I think this is going to be really good for you, because he started to see me run into obstacles in my own physical practice, things I just couldn't get into a low stance. I just couldn't get my shoulders into the right place. I just couldn't do things through this training method. He was not just a one training method. He was saying, hey, we've got a lot of options. So you keep working this and take up this practice. It's going to help you out long term, And so that's what I started doing. I started doing the Qi Gong on Saturday mornings, and that preceded the Tai Chi, and I would feel great afterwards. Sometimes I'd come in, you know what it is. If you're in your 20s and 7 a.m. on Saturday morning, that's not your prime time. You know what I'm saying? That's just
What were you
not,
doing the night before?
we don't need to get into that space, but we'll just say that 7 a.m. on Saturdays is not prime time. And so I would come out, and so usually what took like a burrito and a nap, in the afternoon to get me through, I was done by 9:30 just by doing Tai Chi and Qigong, which was the system of a 20-year-old doing Tai Chi and Qigong. You know what I'm saying? It's different, obviously, when you're 30, 40, 50, 60, but that's why I say it's different for everybody. It's there for every age. It's not just, it's your energy that you're working with, because my teachers always kept the practice very, very grounded. It didn't get lost in these concepts that are great concepts. I don't discount any concept within these arts. These arts are a rich tapestry of things, but it's how that tapestry is woven that creates the strength of whatever you're using, right? And it's and that's what you're weaving, that's your practice.
Yeah. Well, you said something about luck having a huge role in you discovering like really good teachers. And I think that's especially true because in what you shared of like there's no dignity in front of your teachers, I think if there is, that's like that should be a red flag for someone, but you found a teacher where that was like true. And I think that if you can trust your teacher, then that is inherently true. And if you can't trust your teacher, that might not be your teacher.
Right.
But
Well,
there's also some other things like you were sort of predisposed to working really hard and training, like that was kind of a part of your makeup from childhood. So that was like a little bit of an easier pill to swallow when you got into training in the martial arts. And then on top of that, you did something else where you listened to your intuition. So that isn't like, I don't know, I guess we could say that's miraculous because how many like 20-year-old, 23, 2-year-olds especially like not to like put a super general blanket on everyone, but like 22-year-old guys, like how many are listening to this intuition, this call? It's hard to put things down after you have spent your whole life kind of cultivating them. And then especially playing at like a collegiate level, it's like identity gets really wrapped up. So that's
oh,
kind of
totally.
miraculous that you felt some
Well,
kind of call to switch it and then you did it. And then you found a good teacher that you could trust.
like I said, like I had some, how to put it, like, I had some of these tendencies even before I got into the esoteric arts, you could call them. And esoteric is such a weird term. Like, it just means maybe just non-standard. You know what I mean? Things that you have to sort of shift a little bit of your perspective to get into. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I could remember being a teenager in the bookstore when those things existed and finding the Tao Te Ching. the book by Lao Tzu, the Taoist book, right? And being so intrigued because it was so skinny and it was like the oldest book ever written, 800 years before the Bible or some weird stuff like that. I was like, interesting, and like one of my basketball coaches called me a contrarian, you know what I mean? Like if everybody's going right, I'm just going to go left, just because, And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, well, I'm going to read this. I'm going to buy this and read this because it's contrary to everything else that people are talking about around me. And so I started reading it. I didn't understand a freaking thing, but you can remember some of it, and it's just all weird, and some of it makes sense, and some of it doesn't. And I had this great translation by Stephen Mitchell, which is the translation because
He's amazing.
yeah, he's awesome. You know what I mean? He knows how to work within the language and the culture, and to pull that into the current language and culture without losing some of that
Mm-hmm.
context, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
which is very important. And so when like when I got into these arts, it was from a physical philosophical standpoint. And now being in a wanting to get into martial arts, I mean, I'll be honest, like I didn't care that much about being like the toughest dude and being able to beat people up. You know what I mean? Like I really just didn't, like it was just, I wanted to be able to just do those things, move my body that way. I wanted to be able to learn how to throw good punches and do all the cool stuff you see in the movies and stuff like that. But I also knew that to do it, it had to be real. It had to be based upon the real stuff. So it had to be applicable. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but so I wasn't going to train something that I didn't think was applicable or useful or that I couldn't use. It's just that wasn't a big motivator for me. It was just more like a check. You know what I mean? Like I just knew enough. Like when I was training, like when I was playing sports, I just knew like there could be 20 coaches and all of them are amazing coaches. You know what I mean? But 19 of them are assholes. I don't know if I can say that's fine. And
That's
so
fine. Yeah.
I'm going to choose the guy who's not, because I can find one who's not.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I could find one who's not. And then, so just because somebody can use it and be effective and there's like, yeah, this is all applicable, doesn't mean that that's the person you have to train with or you want to train with. And just because you don't want to train it, just because you don't want to be the uber aggressive guy, doesn't mean you don't train it for use and application. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like things like BJJ these days are great because people can train them to such an advanced degree for pure effectiveness within that art in places that allow for that to be expressed. You know what I'm saying? And so people can just get after it and they don't have, and of course there's a big range, but you can of aggressiveness within there, but it can start to be focused into more, if you got the right teachers, always teaching is the person who is directly in front of you is always the most important, always the most important. Then it's style, then it's lineage, and then it's all the other stuff. You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
so with the right teacher, always. But like what I'm saying is, getting able to use yourself, feel your energy, but not always be so tied within those aggressive spaces
Mm-hmm.
was the kind of essence of traditional Chinese martial arts for me. You know what I mean? It was how to train it and bridge those spaces so you can find something beyond them a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when I was looking, so as I had these experiences with my first teacher, and that's the way he worked. I mean, it was just like he was like, here's me doing it. You're not doing it. To do it, you have to think about all these other things. And then once you're able to think about all those other things, then maybe you can start thinking about how to use it,
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be able to shift your focus. It can't be right from
Yeah.
the it can't be right from the beginning how to use it. So your intention, your focus start grounding inward first, not outward towards whatever is beyond your hands. You get what I'm saying? And so
Yes.
those are the teachers I looked for, teachers who were working in those spaces, but still had a level of effectiveness that was backed up by the skill of the person in front of me, by what I knew about the style, and then what the lineage would show me too through the histories and stories. And I was very lucky to find the teachers I did because, like I said, part of it's luck. You walk into the right place, there's your number one example, first example. And then after that, you go get another example. You're making comparisons. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's just human nature,
I do that in like the yoga world all the time. But like to
Yeah,
back it up, for listeners who don't know, BJJ is Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I think a lot of people know that, but just in case. And then so
right.
speaking of like breaking that down, so Qi Gong and Tai Chi. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've heard is that those things were developed for as essentially like body and energy work for the other martial arts, Kung Fu. And is that correct or am I off?
That's definitely an entry in the definition of Qigong and Tai Chi. You know what I'm saying? Like the definition of Qigong and Tai Chi is quite broad. And so when you look at it from different perspectives, it's going to have different definitions. So you're 100% right. It's a practices that work with your energy. You know, that's looking at the energy of the body. But within that, how people interpret that practice, what specific skill sets they are trying to pass on through what specific methods, through what specific material is going to be widely varied from, you know, person to person, lineage to lineage, style to style. Now, Tai Chi and Qigong share a broad history as being part of the, you know, the history of China and the culture and people of China. So they do have larger cultural context. And so, and then there's the popular culture of where we look at them today, right? And so I think it's important, like when you're looking at some of these practices, to kind of look at it like that, to kind of like, let's make some layers to it so that our understanding can have a little bit of depth, because that's exactly what we're going to do in these practices. You know, try to look at how we move from multiple perspectives so that we allow for a little bit more depth. And then also, right, if you're looking at things from different perspectives, eventually the perspective from which you are looking from becomes much clearer. And so that's how we learn to ground and center through an integrative practice, is using, because back in the day, people would practice many things together. Things didn't really exist in isolation that often. Only in small places did they exist in isolation, you know, temple arts or things like that. That's not always, sometimes that's good, preserves things, you know, but then, you know, this is what it is. Sometimes things got to
Yeah.
evolve, you know. So anyways, Qigong translates as energy work. And so Qi means, well, it just means in the language of, in Chinese, it means energy. Okay.
It's like
It is,
prana almost. In yoga, prana is like life force.
it's like this. If you've never heard that word before, Qi means nothing.
Hmm.
Okay. If the first time you hear it, it means gibberish. Okay. If you've been practicing Qigong for 20 years, it means a lot. Okay. Right. Because it's a practice combined with Gong, which means skillful work. Right. So it is very much its own thing, separate from, like, it's not prana. It's not just energy. It is something contained within a practice that you are developing. And now, what is that? You know, how do you as an individual relate to that? I mean, it is very much conceptual. So for some people, it becomes a conceptual construct for building out theories based upon Qi conversion and five element theory, organ theory, that they then use to observe, you know, the workings of the body, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of deep theory within it. But I guess
I
my whole
thought, if I
point,
may, I thought like I always thought about chi like almost like gravity or like more of a, yeah, like a force, not so much a concept. And I've always heard it like kind of compared to like that of prana and like many circles, both like in moments where I've been in like dojos and some kind of martial art and also yoga. So this is like a really very like intellectually stimulating concept for me right now.
I think so as well. That's why I try to study it. So I appreciate I'm glad you like it too. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So there is a mental construct of Qi that you need to build, right?
Hmm.
If you're going to work with anything conceptually and make it larger than how it begins, right? Then you need to allow for space. The character for Qi is a pot with rice in it, boiling over fire with a kettle on it. And it shows the steam popping that up. And so these are the qualities of Qi that we look for, because Qi does exist physically separate from the mental construct. If you have the mental construct, you get what I'm
Got
saying?
it.
You get what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
we right now there is a really buzzword that everybody is talking about, which is interoception. Okay, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this yet, but interoception is the blanket term for when you turn your sensory experience inward rather than outward. And so now as you're looking inward, what is that sense called? And the blanket term is interoception that they're using. And it's how if you cut it up into different slices, there's things like proprioception, which has to do with your joints and how you know where your body is in space. Almost all of this has to do with where your body is at in space, by the way, which is fascinating. And then vestibular, which has to do with more like your VOR, your vestibular occipital reflex, which is how your eyes and your ears, orient yourself in you can almost say this is how you orient in the horizontal plane, whereas the other one is how you're doing in the vertical plane. This is how I would sometimes talk about it in Tai Chi. And so those two things provide internal sensory input. And so if you've never if you've never looked inward with an intention and said, what am I perceiving internally? What are you going to label that internal awareness? Has anybody ever given you a label for it? Has anybody ever said anything like that? Or you just go, that's this, or hey, that's my spleen, or this might be the burrito I had for breakfast, or you know what I'm saying? But what if within a contained practice you said, what I observe is Qi? That's just a word that I use for me, that when I look internally and I see something, it's Qi. Boom, I feel it, it's Qi. You're probably wrong. But it's a start, because eventually that is where you end up. Because where does the classics lead us? Everything is Qi. Everything is energy. Everything is made up of energy. But we have to start looking at what is more relevant to us personally within our practice, right? Well, internally, that is creating a space that we can perceive fully. We want our awareness to be able to get fully into our body and ground within our body, right? And so to do that, we have to attune that internal interoception to look inward more. And this also plays on the idea of the microcosm, right? Polarity, as within, without, as below, above, right? And so as we look inward, as we get those sensory inputs more integrated along standards that are connected to posture, breath, movement, skill that you are working with, then, as you're doing that, how you are conceptualizing these things is going to evolve. And then as the inputs internally get stronger, the outputs, well, they evolve too, but it's a process, obviously. I'm not going to say they all of a sudden go, I'm perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a panacea for everything, but it is pretty darn close. You know what I'm saying? Because all you're dealing with is you when you look at this practice. And the thing is that, and this is not something that is necessarily, it's common knowledge, but it's not necessarily common knowledge, so to speak. And it's, and it's just a thing, like there's many different theories within Chinese Qi Gong, Chinese medicine, these traditional arts. There's different theories at which to look at the energy system. They overlap, but which perspective, which theory you use is important, right? And so the predominant one that is applied today is the Zhang Fu theory, which has to do with organs and kidneys and stuff. And this is a great perspective for a clinician to use on a patient. It's a great perspective for an advanced practitioner to use on a new student. At times, not always. I don't like it, and I can tell you why. But let's just get out of the realm of the organs and not think about what organs do, because that's too much knowledge. The organs occupy very deep spaces of the body. The deepest spaces of the body. And it's just a simple spatial water displacement. You drop yourself in the bathtub, they are the deepest spaces of the body. And so they will represent that, how the energy in that area, what are those systems working like? How is it being compressed? There's a lot of stuff that has to move in through those deep spaces, because when our awareness looks down there, it's deep, right? It's a hard space to see clearly. That's just how our body is built out, right? And so because of that, it's not a very useful one for practitioners. If you're looking inward and going, is that my kidney? Is that my liver? I'll tell you what, I don't want that responsibility.
Yeah. I have to
I do
say, as
not.
like a
I do not.
practitioner,
Yeah.
in my experience, like I personally haven't mentalized it so much, and maybe just I haven't like gone down that road, and I'm sure you could. But there's something you're speaking about, like our internal organs and our internal anatomy, and there's something with like Qigong specifically, and I've never experienced this with any other form of like movement or meditation. I encounter what feels like more of my subtle anatomy and myself that exists outside of my skin. And maybe it's me plus something, or I don't know, but it's really, really cool. And until this conversation, I haven't overthunk it. So like, I haven't tried to understand what is this? What can I feel? But it's now that we're talking about it, it is definitely extension of my anatomy, something so deep, but it's like it's not skin deep. It's weird, but cool. And that's why I keep going back.
I tell my students, I go, train until you can feel and perceive your bones because they're the most enduring part of you. Like if you're most likely you will keep most of them, hopefully, right? Throughout your entire life, and they will be here long after the rest of you is gone, right? So if you learn to get in and perceive yourself on that level, then your body is going to naturally be orienting itself differently. And now, as a practitioner, when you're first getting out in these practices, and I think this is actually very useful to talk about because this is really what I'm getting at when I talk about all this stuff. Because as somebody who teaches these things and has been teaching them for a long time, I mean, these have been a really intimate part of my practice for a long time. If I get injured, I'm doing Qi Gong. If I had a bad day, I'm doing Qi Gong. If I've had a great day, I do Qi Gong. If I've whatever, I do Qi Gong. I mean, I've done it literally every day for forever, it seems like. And so, I mean, I've done it in a lot of different states. And then as I've been teaching it, I see, how people interact with the practice as beginners. And I think this is really important. This is where I put a lot of my thought these days is how, as a beginner, are you going to interact with this practice? Because me as somebody who's been around for a long time, I got my own thing going on to a little bit in my own practice, you know what I mean? And that should be connected to what I am teaching my students 100%. But from looking through it through that lens and seeing, like my teacher, one of my direct teachers, he taught Qigong forever. He still does. It's been like 30, 40 years. And, I see what he's gone through teaching beginners and people all the time, and people have stayed with him long term, et cetera, et cetera. His teacher taught in Seattle, taught Qigong since like the 60s, the same things. We've been like within our lineage, we've been teaching to people for a long time. To real people, not necessarily just conceptualizing it. And so
Mm.
when I got out of actually under that tutelage, so to speak, and was interacting with the Qigong world at large, I started being like, wow, it seems like there's a lot of other ways that people are interacting with it that this doesn't seem quite the same way that I was doing it per se. Like everybody was doing very similar things, but it seems so rigid. It seems so locked in. It had to be this way. Like the Qigong I was taught was so freeing and so relaxing. And you just let your mind build around these concepts that you are actually feeling and doing and working with. And then it like we use the concept of a tree. All those great advanced concepts are supported by a really strong root and trunk and branches. And me, I'll be like, that's your feet and your legs, and then you can stand tall and still, and then you'll feel all the stuff that you want to feel. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so as I started looking at this, I started to realize this practice should just be so simple and easy in the beginning. There is no pressure. Just come and practice and relax. Don't worry about remembering anything right away. Like the practice is there for you. I'm not going to stop practicing. You know what I'm saying? Like just
Mm-hmm.
come and practice. Like I'll be there every time practicing, and you get to come and practice along with me. You get to turn your brain off, move through all the movements, feel it. You hear the stuff get repeated. I can still hear my teachers' voices in my head. I hear them talk to me, and I'm like, hey, 3 harmonies, guys.
It's
And so,
wonderful.
yeah, and
I love it. I just
that's all
can't
you need to
stress
do.
this enough. Please come and try it for yourself, listeners.
I'm 47 now, and I've been doing this. I started in my early 20s, And, I feel so much more connected to my body now than I did when I was in high school, and even college. And I know that there are actual athletic areas that I am performing in better than I was back then. Now, does that say that I could beat that guy in one-on-one? No, I mean, I try. I definitely
Give it
know where to.
hell.
I definitely know where to cheap shot him. I know where all his weak points are. But no, but my point is that like my a big part of why I got into these arts was that my teachers were telling me this will allow you to take the skill that you're building with you. You're going to feel it. We're connecting it to how you breathe, how you move. Just your basic orientation of where you're at in space is going to be better, right? Because of this. And so that is what we're trying to improve. That's the concept of integration, not just specialization, not just, I'm an ex-athlete, I'm an ex-basketball player, I'm an ex-martial artist, or I do this. It's like now that you've done all that work, you put all that work in. Now let's see where we can go and now universalize these skills, right? You specialize, now we need to universalize. So that's what Qi Gong does. That's what Tai Chi does. When Tai Chi is practiced well, it is like Qi Gong. It is a little bit different. To kind of give a little bit of an idea of how they differ, because we are offering both those classes at Tower Yoga. There's Tai Chi or Qi Gong is first for the first hour, and then Tai Chi is right after, which is how I almost always teach it and how I almost always practice it. For a really easy way to put it is if you imagine at the edge of your hands, if you're pushing or pulling or anything, that just at the very edge of your fingertips and the edge of your toes, that is as far as your actual internal space spreads out, right? And so in Qigong, we don't care about anything outside of that, pretty much. Only thing that really attunes outside of that might be the gaze and the ears and maybe the nose if you smell something from way over there, you know what I'm saying? But as far as how we're trying to perceive our movement, we want that to stop at that outer edge. If I'm raising my arms up, there is not a fictitious thing on my hands or arms that I'm pretending I'm lifting up. It is only my hand that I am lifting up. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that way, that is very much internal. We're saying we want this energy to learn to stop at this point, right? Now, there's different energy systems that we can talk about, or how your chi, according to these arts, might differentiate inside. Because that's, like I said, you want to learn to perceive it as one. Now, how your subconscious and how your body is working with its own internal energy, well, that's a whole other ballgame, right? And then how you can start to take different layers to your awareness and look at them differently. Qi also has a huge idea of that. There's the qi you get from your food, the qi that you get from, your external environment. There's your protective qi. There's your nutritive qi. There's your yang qi and your yin qi and your whatever qi. You know what I'm saying? There's all kinds. But to find that, you need to start somewhere, right? And so that's how I mean, if you end up practicing and you're staying in that space for a long time, you can go where you want to go. Traditionally, Qigong went so many ways. Like the basic practice is universal, but then you had people taking it into the martial realm for things like hard training, because you're just building more energy in your body. You got more energy in your body. What are you going to do with it? Okay, you're going to take it into your training. Because now, let's say Tai Chi training, we're going to look at what's happening from the hands outward, right? Very specifically, if I was underwater and I was taking my hands and pushing them, what would that wave look like? What would be projected out from me at my hands or from any point in my body? That's kind of like Tai Chi. So you can see why Qi Gong and Tai Chi are going to be very useful together, because how you project that energy out from your movement, well, you're doing that from the internal input that you are sensing and how you're creating that entire movement from the level of your organs to the level of your skin on the outside, eventually, if you train it for a long time, right? And so that's like, it creates a way when you're practicing both of those together. And like I said, there is how Steve practices his Tai Chi and how this lineage practices his Tai Chi. And so I'm not speaking for everybody here, and how anybody else practices their Tai Chi or their Qi Gong. I get people ask me all the time, so what about this or what about that? They're asking me about other teachers or other styles or other systems. I'm like, I don't know. No
People
idea.
ask me that about other
Yeah.
style teachers and styles of yoga too, and I'm like,
I'm
I
like,
have
I'm
no
like,
idea. And they like almost like shocked.
why would I know that? Why would I know
Yeah.
that? Like I know what I was physically there to witness and experience and immerse. And what you are seeing in my practice is the direct result of that. So,
You're teaching what you know.
I'm teaching what I know. That's it. And so like,
I
and
like that we
sometimes,
have this conversation though, because I have a little bit of a different understanding that I didn't have before, like the Qi Gong about like this inward, almost like containment for lack of better word, and then the Tai Chi
totally.
is what you do with that. And in a couple days, I'll be coming to class and I'm taking both classes. I've just been able to take Qi Gong lately, but I like moved my schedule around to so I can take both, and that'll be interesting to now that I have this knowledge.
Oh yeah.
Again, I don't need to overthink it because I just go and I just look forward to it and my body relaxes in a weird and different way. And it does feel like it parallels a lot with yoga. I think maybe I have been interchanging some of like my understanding the concepts of like prana, because same thing, we get prana from food and we generate prana and all these things, which because it is interchangeable. And now I'm realizing that that's not really quite right. They're not exactly synonymous. And
Well,
but
and
that being said, there's so many parallels, and you must know that because you and your wife have a, martial arts school and yoga center.
right.
So obviously there's some kind of connection there.
You make the connection. That's the thing. You make the connection. The connection that you make between those concepts is what's going to give them the energy. Because what we are given through the traditions is just other people's experiences, right? Other people who went through the practice trying to share their experience and say, this is this, this is that. So you got prana coming from one culture and you got chi coming from another culture, but they're both just using the bodies, but they both come from deep practices with people really observing their human experience, right? And they were looking at this not in terms of like, hey, you know what? I need to know everything there is about prana. I need to define chi to the nth degree. No, I didn't mean for that to rhyme. But right,
Bars over here.
right. It's just that you want to be able to use it. A friend of mine who was wise beyond his wisdom in this saying said, these arts are tools to train your body and mind. It is not your body and mind are not tools to train these arts, meaning they serve you. You do not serve them. These arts are meant to serve you. So that means that if you have a concept of prana and you start to develop a concept of chi, if you can develop those concepts and look and see where there is an overlap, where is there a difference, then you're going to expand both of those realms for you to work within, because now you can step between those. And will it sometimes be confusing? Yes, it will. Of course it will, because you have two different systems that you're working within, but this is the world we live in. People don't live in bubbles anymore. You can't go sit in a temple and just go, yeah, and people know about things, they've heard about things. So when you practice, it's like, I like to look at these things as, okay, you got all this information, we got to sift through it a little bit, so let's look at it from different perspectives and say, like, let's just look at this one without looking at this one, and now let's look at this one without looking at this one. You know what I mean? So let's
It's
pretend
being
we
really
didn't.
intentional about
Yes.
how you're looking, and I really like that. And I can't remember, I just was reading in a book and there was a quote and it was from a monk, but it was like, we are like, our goal in life, and this is a monk speaking, is to realize that we're spiritual beings learning how to become human. And it's
Right.
like not the other way around. And so sometimes I think we get into some of these, what you called like esoteric practices or, concepts, and it's like, oh, we're just these humans trying to understand these like far out spiritual concepts. But really, it's so funny because they're all pointing to like just showing us how to like be more human and like
Totally.
be more in our body.
Just be like, one of my favorite concepts in any of these arts is just simply the concept of Jin. Jin means true, real. That's all it means. And if you look back in the history of like Taoism and things like this, which is, you have the great concepts from China, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Taoism has his own bent, and everything over there is a little bit spiritual, a little bit philosophical, a little bit religious, a little bit in the body, a little bit in, it's all over the place. It's great. And so this concepts that you get. Actually, I kind of lost my train of thought over there because I started thinking about Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism,
Well, we're
and
talking
it's
about
so
becoming more
confusing.
human.
Right. It's
Speaking
this
of being human,
yeah, right there. It's that, this concept of Jin. You see it in these practices, just repeated over and over and over again. Jin, Jin, Jin. And I love the word. I love it so much that I use it incorrectly in Chinese all the time on purpose. I used to always say, like, this is really interesting. And you don't say that. You don't say Jin Yo Isa, like, which is in Chinese. It's just like it's a weird saying. In English, it makes sense. In Chinese, it doesn't make sense. So every time I say it, my teacher would laugh. You just think, it's funny. He even thinks this is really interesting. like to the level I would think it was interesting, he would thought was so funny because he just wouldn't use it as a descriptor, for
oh,
that.
how funny. But truth, I like that. And one like translation of truth could just be reality as it is.
That is the actual, in my opinion, definition of Jin. The definition of Jin is simply looking to perceive reality. So, like, what's the saying? When you first start Buddhism, mountains are mountains and lakes are lakes, and then they're not, and then they're mountains again, and their lakes are like, because you're just looking at them. Oh, it's just a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
It's just is what it is. And so, when you're one of my teachers, when he describes Tai Chi, he simply says, learning to play with gravity. And you had mentioned gravity earlier, like as an aspect of Qi, right? And so, or an aspect of energy, 100%. It's such a ubiquitous aspect of it that we don't even really count it of it, do we? We don't even think about it in terms. And so when you're sitting there and you're in your standing meditation, or you're doing your form and you're slowing way down and you're starting to feel heavy, what are you playing with a little bit? Right? Did you all of a sudden, did you go from 150 pounds to 200 pounds all of a sudden? So what are you literally playing with, and what does that connect you to?
We could like talk for a million hours. I feel like I could just
Yeah,
like sit here and talk to you for so long. We do need to wrap it up
yeah.
because
Can I add one little thing to that?
please,
One little thing?
please. I was just going to say, like, any
Because it
final
totally,
thoughts or anything like that.
well, just on that last little concept, like for me, to the essence of the practice is like that, it doesn't need to be much more than that. You get what I'm saying? Like, you can just be there in your space, experiencing it, doing it. Going beyond that is almost always extra. That's just a bonus. You get what I'm saying? But the goal of, like, when you get down to it, that concept of Tai Chi, which is just a concept, it's a concept that predates the arts that they're associated with now. That's just it. Just being there, being present, and experiencing what you are experiencing. That's it. So come join us
Yeah.
at join us at Tower Yoga and do some Tai Chi and Qi Gong.
Please, right now, this is not necessarily like evergreen because this could potentially change in the future, but right now at the time of this recording, and it is April 7th, there is Qi Gong at 9 a.m. on Wednesdays, followed by Tai Chi at 10:15. And we've talked about maybe perhaps throwing out some workshops on the weekends. I know
Yeah.
not everyone can make it on Wednesdays. And then potentially Sonny will make some videos. We've been putting some more videos on our YouTube for people to practice when they're at home. Like maybe you can't get in, but that could be a way that you could experience it. I just highly recommend it. Again, I'm like such a novice in it, but I really, really love it. I don't understand why, but I go in if I'm feeling good. I'll go in if I'm not feeling good. I've been injured and I went injured. And no matter what, there's something about it. And because I think that there is something inherently so relaxing about just allowing yourself to witness truth or be in truth. And I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, this practice and the way that you kind of hold the space allows me to kind of drop in. Like I trust you as a teacher, like you were just saying. And so I don't know, it's just really easy for me to just kind of go into that experience and to be like, what the hell is actually happening here? And then go on about my day. You know what I mean? I'm not all
Yeah,
weirded
totally.
out the rest of the day being like, what was that? Oh, I go about and do like the rest of my day, but there's something really cool. And you know what? Like life, I know we have so much going on and like things to do and places to be, but this is just one of those practices where it makes me feel like I'm so grateful for being alive and experiencing this and allows me to experience myself as like a living breathing being in a way that I guess I don't even need to like fully like understand, but you have to just come and try it is what I'm saying.
Yeah, please do. This is a shared practice. Like I say, I'm a student always, teacher sometimes. And so even in class, I'm practicing, we practice together, right? Like I'm doing it along with everybody, which is this is exactly how I was taught. And so it's like a practice that, just reaches back. You're doing the same thing with people that were doing it generations ago. And so on many levels, it's just very grounding, and I'm very happy to share it. Like it's something that's given me a lot in my own personal life, and whether that be my physical performance or my mental and emotional well-being as well. And so it's just I'm really honored to be able to just share it with the Valley. Growing up here, I never thought that I would be coming back to teach these kind of arts here. You know what I mean? Like I had no
Hmm.
idea. So, it's been a little bit of an uphill battle because people don't know about him here. It's just meaning we don't get the same amount of like exposures might in some other places where people are Googling this kind of stuff a little bit more often. But the reception has been great. The community has been amazing here in the Valley. And so like it's been awesome. So I'm really happy that
Good.
I've been able to make it up to Fresno now and start doing it up there too. So
And it's for everyone. And I do
everybody.
think that like there is like and of course everyone's welcome, but I do think that people have a thing in their head of it's like you have to be like elderly in the park or something like
Yeah.
that, which,
You know,
hey, if that's your vibe, like you're welcome too, but
it
it's
gets
literally for everyone.
everybody.
And
Yeah.
I think while it doesn't necessarily have you don't have to have like, it's not the demands of like a power yoga class or something like
No,
that.
no,
So I do
not
think
at
it's
all.
extremely accessible. It's not necessarily easy either. It's
Mm-mm.
extremely accessible, but like very challenging. It's sneaky.
You learn how to challenge yourself, and you're gonna, and some of the because this practice has been around for a long time, like the method of practice and actual, even the specific exercises we do, they're sort of meant to expose those things. Like, I tell my students, you go to the gym and lift weights and you're going to expose your strength. You go and you do Qi Gong for a little while, you're going to expose your weakness and your strength, because a lot of things are going to start talking to you. So you're going to sit there and you're going to feel grounded, you're going to feel centered. Then all of a sudden, that little weak link in the chain is going to go, hi, and you're going to go, whoo, that was a little harder than I thought. And then it gets integrated, and then you're all there together. And so it's a practice that doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you're an elite athlete, or you're, in your 90s and just want to work on your balance and your posture. It does not matter, because you are working with your system, your body. Your 1 rep maximum is always going to be just moving your body around, always, right? And so once you can start to get awareness at that level, you're going to be challenging yourself. You're going to be moving in your own space. There's probably no time, but there were studies done that didn't get put here in the States with collegiate athletes doing Qigong, like 10 minutes a day. And they performed out, like performance went through the roof.
I believe it.
Not only on the field, but just the wellness rating, like the wellness metrics that they were following, also way up. It just so happened that this study just didn't get taken anywhere, because the people who did it just didn't. They went other directions after they were finished. And so, and they probably figured, we're not going to convince anybody to do qigong. we're not going to convince these athletes to do qigong. But anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's for everybody. It's for everybody, for sure.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sunny. Thank you for
Yeah, this is
sharing.
great.
And like I said, we'll have to have you on again because I could just talk forever to you.
Yeah, it'd be
But
fun.
yeah, but and thank you listeners for listening in, and you again are more than welcome to join us on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. and 10:15 a.m. for Qigong and Tai Chi. All right. Thank you so much.